Christine. I'm the creator of College App Help Desk and Essay Cure. The difference between the two is that College App Help Desk is a do-it-yourself option. Essay Cure is the full-service IEC package that I offer, and this is where I explain to you what it looks like to be part of that package. These are the students who I call my why. This is why I do what I do, and all of these students at one point sat in front of me looking for help with the college application process. My background is editorial. I'm both a writer and a certified professional photographer. So when I was in newsrooms, my editors would call me a twofer because it didn't matter if they sent me out with a keyboard or a camera, I could come back with a story. Storytelling is a rhetorical mode that not a lot of students are familiar with. It's not something that we use a lot in high school. When my two kids were going through the college application process, I was working as a freelance writer for the New Orleans Advocate, and I was also the lead faculty for communications, teaching undergraduates comm and English classes. So as I was going through this process as a parent, and my kids were going through the college application process, my kids' friends and my friends' kids, they were all bringing me their college application essays. And that's when I realized they were all making the same mistakes. And I was wondering, I wonder if I'm onto something here. So I started helping students with their college application essays, and I eventually wrote a book that was published in 2023. And the more I learned as a parent, the more I realized I don't know. And so I wrote an additional book, this 10-step guide to help parents and students in this process. I started getting some attention, and in 2023 I won the Loudoun Chamber Small Business Award. One of the things that caught my attention is that the ratio of high school counselors to students is not only is it higher than we would recommend it be, but it's so high that it would be just impossible for a high school counselor to be able to provide this level of service for every student individually. So I went back to school. I know you can't read the small print on the certificate, but I did 16 graduate level hours in college admissions and career planning at the University of California, Berkeley. The reason this was so important to me to do is because I wanted access to the professional organizations that IECs belong to, and that way I have referral partners, because while I specialize in the essay, there's a lot of students out there who need help with other specialties depending on their situation. I'm also a certified Maxwell Disc consultant and trainer, and I use the student career report assessment for a lot of reasons. Let me go through it and I'll tell you why. It tells the student a lot about themselves. A lot of times students are surprised that their strengths are not strengths that everybody's good at. And so we go through that. We also talk about their communication style and how they communicate with others and in groups. And we get a lot of mileage out of these personal growth areas that show up in a lot of places in this assessment, because those personal growth areas are conversations that I have with students where we talk about things that have happened to them, and sometimes the most compelling college application essays come out of these conversations. We talk a lot about a student's values. When the student can pull their values out of this assessment, it's a lot easier for them than having to sit down and write for me and tell me what their values are. Here they can just read what the assessment says they value, and if that resonates with them, then that's something we can put to work for us right away. We weave these values into their college application essays so that every essay turns into a personal statement. We also talk about their learning styles and their thinking styles, and this is information that won't just help them as they finish high school, but it will really help them as a college student. And then at the end of the assessment, it takes all of their strengths and interests and it spits out lists of potential careers where those strengths and interests could really serve them. And we talk about that, and if that's a direction they want to pursue, then we start looking for strong colleges and universities that offer those programs. Most of the students who come to me are academically qualified students. They've done a lot of work getting good grades, working on their test scores, building a resume. Most of the time, students come to me with one of two things. They either come to me with a list or they come to me with an essay. And I want to tell you how I approach both of these things. Students who come to me with a list often use the words like safety or reach. And the first thing that we talk about is how there is no such thing as a safety school. We use the words likely, target, reach, and unlikely. when this student, for example, came to me with this list, we looked at the acceptance rates. We also looked at the students' grades, the students' test scores, the student's state of residency, and the student's high school profile. I plug all of that information and all of those numbers into software, and the software spits out whether these are unlikely schools for the student. I don't assign that. The numbers tell the story in this process. In a holistic admissions process, there is no single factor that determines admission. A 6% acceptance rate does not equal a 6% chance of admission. The math is not cumulative. Applying to more highly selective schools does not increase your chances of admission at any of them. And it takes students upwards of 20 hours to write the YS essays for these highly selective colleges and universities, which means that the college application process, which is already a part-time job for students, it turns into a full-time summer job in order to apply to this many highly selective colleges. There's another problem with it as well. If you're applying to Harvard, you probably shouldn't be applying to Princeton and vice versa. It's the same thing with Duke and Cornell. These schools are so highly specialized that students need to understand why they're applying to this school. Because if they don't understand why they're applying to Harvard and not Princeton, then Harvard's going to get those essays, and in the YS essay, they're going to be able to tell that. So let's go back to this student who came to me with this list. There were 8 unlikelies on her list, and I said, yes, I will help you, but we need to add some schools to this list because I want a college list to be diversified like an investment portfolio. I don't want all of our eggs in highly selective baskets. So we added some schools. She chose not to take any of the highly selectives off, which was a lot of essay work for her. And when she first came to me, these were her top 3 choices. But after she finished touring all the schools on her list, I think she toured everywhere but UT Austin, she changed her top 3 choices. So then we ran the numbers, and I always do this with students. This particular student was a Tennessee resident, so UT Knoxville had a different price than it would have for out-of-state students. It's important for students to see these numbers. These are big numbers. And it's very important to me to change the conversation from financial aid to paying for college because students are purchasing an education. And for most families, this is the 3rd largest expense that they will face behind buying a home and saving for retirement. The first thing that happened is she got into her first choice college, and then she got into her second choice, and they offered her a very enticing scholarship. We ran the numbers again. Once that scholarship was plugged in, it brought down the cost of an out-of-state Research One institution to within $6,000 of her in-state price. She ended up choosing LSU, and she's thriving there today. This is another type of student, a student who comes to me with an essay. This student, spoiler alert, actually did very, very well in this process. But before that first acceptance letter came in, she came to me and said, will you edit this for me? And the problem with will you edit this for me is that we're not applying for an MFA in creative writing. This is a college application essay, and undergraduate academic writing is a technical skill, and students need to learn this skill. And that was my specialty when I was teaching. This student did what many students do and used the 5-point hamburger rhetorical mode that they're so used to using in high school. She spent 477 out of 650 words writing an introduction. 73% of her essay was introduction. She didn't answer the question that the prompt was asking, and she was in the wrong rhetorical mode. And that's when students say, what's a rhetorical mode? And the catch-22 there is students don't really do a deep dive into all of this until they get to college, but first they have to get in. And so this is where I come in and I break down academic writing at the undergraduate level for students. I break it down and then I give them tools to use to make this work easier on them so that they never sit down with an essay assignment again and stare at a blank page. I have found that students spend so much time, upwards of 30 minutes per assignment, staring at a blank page, and I don't want them doing that anymore. So I show them how to get around that academic writing hurdle. This student went on to do very well in this process. Not only did she get accepted into almost every school she applied to, but she got some very nice scholarship offers as well. So that's my goal. My goal is to make a student jump off the page and to turn an admissions officer into an advocate with a college application essay. Because when all other things are equal on paper, the application essay is the one thing they have complete control over and can separate them from tens of thousands of other applicants. One of the reasons this work is so important to me is because 1 in 4 college freshmen do not return for their sophomore year. And the thing about a college degree is you only get that return on investment if you graduate, and you can't graduate if you don't return. Something I like for parents to see is when I was applying to college, it was somewhere on the left of center in this graph where 30 to 35% of students had straight A's. Nowadays, that number hovers between 70 and 75%. So grade inflation is definitely alive and well in this country. Look, I know that your student is a high flyer. All the students who are in front of me are exceptional and they're high flyers. But students tend to forget about the whole sorting hat process that happens in the middle. There's a lot of things that students don't have control over, and holistic admissions is one of them. So we talk a lot about all of this stuff, and we pay a lot of attention to the numbers because the numbers tell the story, and we need to hear that story. We need to listen to that story. So what do I mean by the numbers? I know you can't read these numbers. They're very, very small on my screen, but GPA, test scores, acceptance rates, those are numbers we look at quite a bit. We also look at the student's high school profile. We look at the total cost of attendance, and we talk about the decisions. So when we're looking at these numbers and mining these numbers, we're using software. I use a tremendous amount of software, and my students have access to this software to help them build their list and then also to help them with their essays. So all of this software pulls from the common data set. Now you can go to a university's website and you can mine around in there for common data set, but this puts it all at your fingertips a lot easier. We look at what this school says they consider very important, we consider it or we don't consider it, because that's where we want to focus on, especially on the students' top choices. Then we run this software and the student gets to see where they fall in the larger pool of applicants as far as unlikelies, reaches, targets, and likely schools. This is how we balance their list. We also spend some time here where we're looking at strategy. So you could go early decision to this school, and if you don't get in, you could go early decision 2 to this school. If you're not comfortable with early decision, we can go early action across the board. If you want to go early action with 5 schools and you don't get into any of them, then you could go regular decision with other schools. We're talking about the application fees and what's best for the family. So there's a lot of strategy that goes into this work. We also look at finances, and we look at what each family can expect to pay. So that's a little bit about me and what I do. This is some of the places where I'm involved in. And the first question that parents always ask is, how much does this cost? So I like to throw up this slide and let parents know what IECs across the country are charging. When we do a parent-student consultation, I will tell you what my current prices are, and I will let you know for how long I will honor that price as you talk to one another and come to your final decision. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm here and I'm happy to answer them.